Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is another Deno related tutorial. Essentially, what I want to do in this video is, in my previous Deno video, I went over the framework Oak, which is a web app framework, kind of like Express or something like that, allowing you to make web applications in Deno. Because again, Deno, even though it's a JavaScript runtime made by the same people who made Node, none of the Node versions of the library are going to work in Deno. So there has to be like new versions of those libraries or new libraries created because Deno works differently. But most of those changes are pretty cool changes. So actually on this page here, so here's the URL, actually lists many of the current libraries that are pretty awesome when it comes to Deno. Okay, and you can find most of the stuff you would need to do most of the applications you want to do. Again, this is probably, again, this is 1.0 was just released, and probably not something you'd want to necessarily create a production app in the sense that create an app where you spent a lot of money on. But it's good to learn because as the API improves and changes and becomes more popular, I do feel Deno has a lot going for it, that it will have its share of the backend JavaScript market over time, and probably take a big role in the future of TypeScript. So yeah, okay. So last time we learned Oak, which is, let me see if I can find Oak in this list. I think it's towards the bottom. There it is, Oak. That's pretty much what it is. It's basically based on Koa. Looks like Koa. What I'm going to do today is use Pogo to do an app. Actually, I really like what Pogo can do. There's a couple things it's still building out, such as like serving static files and whatnot. But there's some interesting ways to really get a bit out of it. So here's the Pogo repo. And what I'm going to do is head over to server.js, not server, to Visual Studio, and I'm going to create another Pogo project. And that's one of the great things about Deno. You don't need to, like, I just create a new folder, project 2. And in that folder, I'm just going to create a file called server.tsx again. And I don't new TypeScript compatibility is built right in. So new file, server.tsx. Wait, no, not TSX. TS. Actually, JSX. You'll see why. And that's another neat thing. You can use JSX extensions pretty much out of the get-go as well, along with TS extensions, TSX extensions. Pogo's built to handle sort of JSX out of the get-go, which is nice. So, but yeah, so again, I don't need to type in like Deno init or anything like that. I don't need to have like a package.json because it uses ES6 imports. So the libraries you use are in your code, not in any kind of configuration file. So I'll just use my previous that I created to get my imports. So here are my imports for this Pogo project. I'm going to bring in React, and I'm going to bring in Pogo. And the cool thing about this is that since I've already used these two libraries in my previous example that I didn't record, I was just me practicing, it's already cached these libraries. So next time I compile it, it'll notice that it's already downloaded these libraries in the past and used the cached version, which then, but again, I don't have to like re-download it and all this stuff. And my dependencies are managed because it's all based on the URL. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of that. Okay. So server.jsx, and the way this is going to work is we need to create a server. And the way that works is we're going to say, hey, const server equals pogo dot server, and then here we're going to be passing the port. Let me just see that way I did it before. I'll come back to that. Port 3001. Okay, and it doesn't matter what port number it is. Cool. Now, basically, if you later on we'll be getting body strings, and if you read the documentation, there's just like sample code on like how you can parse the body. That's annoying having to do all that code every time you want to parse the body. So what I did is I turned it into a function. Okay, so this way, whenever you need to parse the body, you can just call on this function to get the body string. So I'm going to leave this up there for a moment, give you a second if you want to copy this down, because this is really useful. I'll probably make my own library to supplement Pogo with some of these functions. Because then there's also, well, parsing the JSON is pretty straightforward enough, but you'll see what I mean in a moment. But basically, this function will just allow us to get the body, because it just gives us the raw input, and we have to take that raw input, read it, decode it, turn it into a string before we can do anything else. It doesn't have a built-in JSON parser or URL encoded parser that I've noticed yet. Again, Deno's still early on, but with this, you can pretty much do everything you need to do. Like, the extra work you have to do isn't too bad. Okay. And some of the places where it saves you time is actually pretty awesome with what it's got built so far. Most of these frameworks are still early in their development, so they're going to evolve a bit. Okay. So this is my body decoding. Okay, the next thing I want to do, okay, we already set up the server. We're going to do my routes, but we'll come back to the routes in a moment. Okay, and then I want to kick in my listener. So this is all pretty straightforward. Okay, start listening. And again, this is one of the cool things about Deno is that it has top level await. So if you're using a function that returns a promise off the get-go, you can use await without it having to be wrapped in an async function. Now, you still have to mark your functions async, but the nice thing about this is, theoretically, the way it's supposed to work is that it will do this, and once this is done, it'll then run this. So unlike Express, where you have to kind of throw in a callback for this text to appear, this is supposed to appear. It doesn't quite work that way in the Visual Studio terminal, but that's sort of what it should be doing. Okay, cool. And that's it. That would create a application. Now, there are Vue libraries for rendering templates that are separate from any other frameworks. So they have one, I think I saw one for EJS and some other ones. There is, but there isn't like a built-in Vue engine here in Pogo. One of many things you'll see that are not there yet, but there's enough to pretty much make most things, you'll see. And again, because all this stuff is really early, because Deno 1.0 was just released, and before, all previous versions of Deno were sort of experimental beta versions. Okay. So let's do our routes. And the way this works is we take our server, and then I'm going to use .get. Okay, technically .get is really short for like .add, and then you have to do all these parameters in there. But if you just do .get, it just automatically assumes that it's a get route. Okay. Make sure I have my variable called server Pogo Server, good. Okay, so what's this? Complaining. Just go take a look. Is it server.route? Yes, server.router.get. There we go. So first we pass in the URL, which will be /, so this is going to be our root route. And then basically you have a callback, just like if you're used to Express. It's going to be the request, so rec, and then H. H stands for your response helper. Okay? And basically, I actually haven't had to use this yet. Okay, it has a couple functions in there that are supposed to help you do a response, but actually the way the responses are handled here is just the return value. Okay, so if you return an object, it returns JSON. If you return JSX, it renders the JSX as HTML, which is what we're going to be doing. Okay, so you can use JSX as your templating language, which is out of the get-go without any kind of configuration, which is really cool. Now, of course, there's things you'd kind of want to get from the request. Well, we'll do that back in a post request to show you all that, but let's return some JSX. So you could just write some JSX. But that's not super fun. Okay, hello world. Okay, so I could just return that and this will work. Because I already imported the React library, so it'll know how to handle it. And then I gave it the JSX file extension. It has to have that to render the JSX. Or TSX if you want to use TypeScript. But it has to have the X. So if I save this, this is technically already working. So I can... So again, I just basically imported the library. I created a server object. This is a function that I created just to help me later. The get body function. I made a basic route, which doesn't look all that crazy from routes you've seen in the past. And start listening. Our list, we kick off our listener. Okay, so let me cd into this folder. cd project 2. Okay, and then you do Deno run. Now I need to allow it to have net access, because again, Deno by default allows you to gives none of your script access. So this way you can't accidentally run a script that deletes all your files. You have to purposely give write access to your files to your script when you run it. So Deno run allow net, which means it allows internet access. And then I wanted to give it to server.jsx. Okay, so see, it's going to compile the script. That'll take a second. Now this generally hasn't rendered that string, so this whole listening on port 3000 won't appear. Let's get back to the browser. Do localhost 3001. Let's see if we get that hello world. And there you get hello world. It returns the JSX. So you can create full pages in JSX. And since we're using ES6 imports, we can just make a views folder. We don't have to like have a view engine per se. I mean, technically JSX can act as your view engine. So you could put the JSX in there, but what I prefer to do is create a function that returns the JSX, essentially a functional component, because then you can have props and all this stuff. Okay, so let's see here. How would I do that? Well, let's just do it sort of in a traditional way. So I'm going to create a new folder. We'll call it views. Okay, and in that folder, I'm going to create a new file called index.jsx. Okay, and then I'm going to bring over the import of React. So I'm going to copy this line over here. And then I'm going to just do export default. And then this will be props. And then return some JSX. So say a div. Then H1 in it right now saying, see, this is my JSX index page. You see why it's complaining about this. That's fine. So I hit save, and that's it. Okay, this prop is done. And now I can go back to server.jsx, and I can import it. So I'll just import index from /fuse/index.jsx. And that's a capital I. Yep, and there, so you can tell it resolves the module from there. Good, save. So now I can just do this. Return index. Although technically, well, I still would want to run it as a function so I can pass in data. So essentially what you would do is you'd pass in any kind of data you want here. So I can just sit here and say, let's make a thing called cheese equals Gouda. Although technically, I could pass in data this way. I could just do it through JSX syntax. So I could just be like index cheese cheese equals Gouda. And that should work. And just to test that out, so I'll save it from there. Go back to my index.jsx, create an h2. And again, I'm doing this assuming you guys already have used React and know React. So this is not a React lesson. This is just showing you how to use Deno, how to use Pogo to create an application. Okay, so then here I can just be like props.cheese. Okay, cool. And that's still complaining over here. Why? Props. Yeah, that's fine. All those TypeScript errors, even though this is not a TypeScript file, so don't give me TypeScript errors. Okay. With that, let me restart the server. Control-C. Okay. And see, now it's compiling the index file, so it's compile the second file because it's a module of whatever. So now when I go back here, see, it works. Okay, so you can pass in just data by sending in JSX to your route. So that's pretty neat. I like that. That's pretty cool. So you can just build out your page this way. So technically, even though it doesn't have like built-in view engine, you can use React because Deno's cool like that, and Pogo's used to take advantage of that. It'll just naturally parse JSX, and since you bring in React, it knows how to handle that JSX. And cool. So now let's do a post route, and you can just chain these together. So I can just do post, and then this will be, we'll just do a post to the root rec h. Okay, and then this will just return a string that says success. Or actually what I'll do is I'll do an object so you can show us that it returns as JSON data. Message success. Cool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab the body because we're going to send some JSON data to this post. Okay, so I don't need to actually have set up any kind of JSON middleware because it just doesn't have these capabilities yet. So what I do instead is I'm going to use this getBody function. So I'm going to say const the body of the request equals getBody, and I have to specify how long the string's going to be because it uses a uint array. So you have to give it a fixed number of spots. So I'm going to do 40. I'm not going to send anything huge. Okay, and then the second thing is, oh, you have to pass in the request. So request, I think you have to pass in request.body. Let me just double check. Yeah, request.body for it to actually parse it. Okay, and then that'll return you the body. Cool. And I actually want this to be parsed as JSON, so I'm going to wrap this in a JSON.parse, so it gives me back the JSON from the get-go, or parses that JSON right off the bat. Okay. And we need to throw some awaits in here, which means I have to make this function async. That's why it's complaining. So await. There we go. And let's see here. So that's how you would get the body, assuming you made my function. This makes life a lot easier to go get the body. Now if you wanted to get URL params, okay, the way URL params works is in the URL or in the route, you would put something like this. Hello. Okay, so let's stick some of this stuff in our object, our return object, params. Okay, is request.params. the body is going to be the body, so I can just do that. And then we'll also throw in some URL queries so we can see how you access that. So URL queries will come from... Okay, actually, the way URL queries works is a little confusing. So let's explain this. You have to kind of know what queries you're going to do ahead of time. There's no like query object that you can just say, hey, here's my query object. The way it works, so let's see here. We're going to have a query called cheese. And this will be the result of rec.search_params.get cheese. So you have to say, you can grab a particular query from the URL, assuming it's there. Okay, and params, why is this complaining? Did I not put a comma? Oh yeah, I forgot a comma after success. So we hit save. So again, we're going to return this object when we make a post request to here. And it'll send us back the params, the body, whatnot, so we can see that we can get this information. Okay, so here's my postman. Localhost 3001. Let me actually restart that server. Control C. Okay, so that's compiling. Let's go to postman. 3001. So we're gonna, for the param should be, you know, what did I call the hello. Okay, so we're gonna call it, so basically we're gonna do world as a param, so that was hello world, and then a query of cheese, which equals Gouda. Okay, and then I also want to send something in the body, so some JSON, which we're sending out the name Bob, age 34. So let's send to this endpoint a post request. Okay, and then there's our response. So you have the message success, so a successful post request. The params are hello, which was world. Body, name, age, 34. So we got our body object. So my function worked, yay. Cheese, Gouda. Okay, and again, the reason why I didn't put the JSON.parse in the function is theoretically you may want to use a different function to parse URL encoded data or whatever kind of other data you may get if it's XML. I'm generally just going to work in JSON, so that's, I could just add the JSON.parse to the function and be good, but you guys get the point. Yeah, so basically, yeah, you can create a full-fledged API with all this. So you have access to all this data here now. So it's just a matter of sending data back and forth. You don't have to do anything crazy to send it back. There's no crazy like response functions. You just return and it does what it needs to do with what you return. So it's actually pretty convenient. You know, with what I have here, I can create most anything. And then again, there are libraries for working with Postgres, Mongo. So I can connect the database using one of those libraries, which I haven't done yet. And if you really want like Express, someone did make a version of Express right here for the Deno. I haven't tried that out yet, so that'll be like my next video. There's .env files, all sorts of good stuff. So check it out. But I thought that was this was a nice little framework, and some of the syntax here had some neat ideas. I really like, again, the way it handles JSX. It just works. I just like it. Okay, not sure how I feel about this H thing yet, but I haven't really played with it yet. So aside from that, that's the Pogo framework for making your backend. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.